Have you ever watched a couple on TV and felt something was just off? They smile, they laugh, they act like they've got the perfect life, but deep down you can tell it's all for the cameras. That's exactly how Maurice and Kimmi Scott came across on Love and Marriage, Huntsville. From the outside, they looked like the dream team, educated, respected, successful. They weren't messy, they weren't loud, they weren't fighting in public. They had that model couple image down to a science. But if you paid attention to the little things, the pauses in conversation, the forced laughs, the way their eyes didn't quite meet, you could tell there was more going on than they let people see. Kimmi was always the one holding things together. She had this quiet strength that made people respect her without her having to raise her voice. She wasn't chasing drama, but she also wasn't blind. From the very beginning, it was clear she was the anchor, the one who kept the family stable. Maurice, on the other hand, was always busy running businesses, speaking at events, and making moves in real estate. He had that polished smile, the one that looks good in photos, but smiles can hide a lot. The turning point didn't come with some big explosive fight. It came when life tested their marriage in the most brutal way: Kimmi's breast cancer diagnosis. That's when true love is supposed to show itself, not through social media posts, not with a bouquet of flowers, but through real presence and emotional support. Maurice was there physically. He went to appointments, held her hand, and made sure people saw him at her side. But emotionally, it was like he'd checked out. Kimmi was fighting for her life, but she was also fighting to feel seen by her husband. She didn't just want him in the room, she wanted him to be there to really show up for her heart, not just her image. One episode hit fans hard. Kimmi was smiling through tears, explaining how exhausting it was, not just the chemo and treatments, but having to keep it together so she wouldn't make Maurice uncomfortable. Imagine battling cancer and still worrying about protecting your partner from your pain. That's not love. That's survival mode. Viewers noticed. Social media started buzzing. Some fans said Kimmi looked drained and distant. Others accused Maurice of focusing more on business than on his wife's health. And over time, the silence between them got louder than any argument could. Then the rumors started. Alleged legal paperwork began floating around, documents that supposedly showed a separation filing, Grant versus Scott. No one could prove if they were real, but the timing made people suspicious. These whispers came while Kimmi was still in the middle of chemo. That's when people started asking the unthinkable: was Maurice protecting his money and preparing for life without Kimmi before she was even out of the hospital? Bloggers added fuel to the fire. Some claimed Kimmi had quietly spoken to a family law attorney not to file right away, but to learn her rights. A few even suggested she discovered financial moves Maurice made behind her back, things like separating bank accounts and moving assets around without telling her. And then came the footage. Blurry, zoomed in, but clear enough to recognize Maurice leaving a law office with another woman. They weren't just walking, they were laughing, touching, moving like two people who shared history. Internet detectives quickly identified her, Dr. Nia Vaughn, a dermatologist from Atlanta. She had private social media, but she'd been spotted in photos from events Maurice attended. The connections were too specific to brush off. Suddenly, all of Maurice's distance and coldness started to make sense. This wasn't just about a man being busy, it was about a man whose energy was going somewhere else entirely. Fans were furious. Hashtags like Maurice Exposed and Justice for Kimmi started trending. Some were shocked. Others weren't surprised at all. But the loudest reaction came not from the rumors themselves, but from Kimmi's response, or lack of one. She didn't rant online. She didn't post cryptic videos. She simply shared one Instagram story, a black background with white text that read, "People know exactly what they're doing. Let the performance fool you." No names. No details. But everyone understood. That silence was her power. While Maurice kept posting about work and smiling for the cameras, Kimmi stopped playing along. She stopped pretending. And behind the scenes, she was making real moves. Then the bombshell hit. A respected blogger reported that Kimmi had contacted one of Atlanta's top divorce lawyers, someone known for handling high-profile, high-stakes cases. That wasn't the action of someone acting on impulse. That was a calculated step by a woman ready to protect herself. People close to Kimmi began talking quietly, anonymously. They said she'd been gathering proof for weeks. Texts, call logs, even photos of Maurice and Dr. Nia taken before the law office sighting. According to them, this connection wasn't new, it had been quietly developing while Kimmi was going through chemo, trying to keep her family together. Another source said Kimmi found messages between them. They weren't graphic, but they were intimate inside jokes, late-night check-ins, I miss this and you always get me. That might not be a physical affair, but it was still betrayal. Because when your wife is bawled from treatment and crying herself to sleep, you shouldn't be telling another woman she's your piece. When Kimmi confronted Maurice, he didn't deny the messages. He minimized them. He blamed her stress, her mood swings, even her medication. He called her paranoid. Classic gaslighting, turning her hurt into a medical side effect instead of taking responsibility for the choices he made. That was it. The final straw. This wasn't just about another woman. It was about years of Kimmi holding everyone together while her own needs went ignored. It was about the countless nights she faced her pain alone while Maurice played the perfect husband on TV. It was about realizing she'd been fighting for a marriage that, in his mind, was already over. So she made her choice not in rage, not in revenge, but in clarity. She'd tried counseling. She'd prayed. She'd begged for effort. But all she got in return was indifference, silence, and secrets. When she filed, it wasn't a cry for attention, it was a declaration of self-worth. The divorce papers weren't just about ending a marriage. They were about reclaiming herself. About refusing to shrink, to suffer quietly, to let someone else's comfort matter more than her own healing. And as that news spread, one thing became crystal clear: Kimmi Scott wasn't breaking. She was finally free. Those documents weren't just pages filled with dates and statements, they were a collection of every moment Kimmi had swallowed her hurt in silence. People close to the situation say they painted a clear and painful picture. It wasn't built on wild accusations or flashy scandals. Instead, it was a pattern, subtle, steady, and deeply damaging. Emotional neglect, dismissive responses, and a heartbreaking absence of comfort when she needed it most. It was the kind of pain you can't always explain to others, because it's not about shouting matches or public betrayals. It's about sitting next to someone you love and still feeling completely alone. The filing reportedly mapped out key moments over the years, times when Kimmi reached out for real connection and was met not with warmth, but with logic, cold reassurances, or worse, silence. When her hair began to fall out from chemo, it wasn't only about losing her looks. It was the loss of something deeper: her sense of identity, her control over her own body, her femininity. That's a grief only someone who has lived it can fully understand. And in those moments, what she needed was to be held, to be reminded that she was still beautiful, still desired, still herself even without the wig or the lashes. But instead, she was told to stay strong and keep her head up. Maybe those words came from good intentions, but they landed like empty air when her heart was begging for tenderness. And that was the real wound. It wasn't about what Maurice said, it was about everything he didn't say. No handwritten notes slipped into her purse before an appointment. No long, late-night talks where he told her how proud he was of her fight. No gentle reminders that she was still the woman who had captured his heart years before. Then came the moment that changed everything. Sources say when Kimmi stumbled across those private messages, her heart sank, not because of anything explicit, but because of what they revealed. Another woman was getting the softness she'd been craving. The man who always seemed so emotionally distant with her was capable of showing care, empathy, and attentiveness. He just wasn't choosing to show it to his wife. And that kind of realization cuts deeper than any tabloid headline. From there, more layers started to peel back. A legal contact claimed Kimmi discovered Maurice had quietly been moving his personal and business finances apart during her treatments. Nothing illegal, nothing she could take to court as proof of wrongdoing, but the message was loud and clear. These were the moves of someone preparing for separation, not the actions of a man fully committed to the fight alongside his wife. For Kimmi, that was it. Her worst fears weren't just in her head, they were written in bank transfers, account changes, and carefully timed decisions. While he was smiling for cameras, playing the role of the supportive husband on television, off camera he was drafting the blueprint for a future without her. So she made her decision. And she made it quietly. When she walked away, it wasn't a dramatic exit or a TV-ready breakup. It was something more powerful, an act of self-preservation. This wasn't about punishing Maurice. It was about saving herself. People close to her noticed the shift immediately. She spoke less, but when she did, her words carried weight. She stopped explaining her choices to those who would never understand them. She stopped pouring her energy into someone who only gave her a fraction in return. There was no bitterness in her steps, only clarity. She began showing up differently, not as a wife trying to hold a marriage together, but as a woman ready to rebuild her own life. Meanwhile, Maurice seemed to vanish into the background. No public statements, no heartfelt posts addressing the rumors. Just carefully staged PR moves and an unusual spike in business-related promotions. It was as if he wanted to shift the spotlight elsewhere. But it was too late.